Hey guys, this is a Jaeger Task guide for the Huntsman Path Evil Watchman. For this task, we do have to eliminate 5 PMCs in the dorms area on customs. So here's a map of customs, and on the map I do have what's classified as the dorms area for this task marked. And as you can see, the kill zone is not just limited to inside the 3 and 2-story dorm buildings. It does actually include the courtyard section between the two, as well as the overflowing dorms trash area and also around the ice cream building. And as with any kill area task that BSG does implement, it will give you a small buffer of about 10 meters around the buildings for leeway, where the kills will also count, so it really is quite a decently large area. Now, one thing to know is that your PMC does not have to be inside of this zone, just the enemy has to be inside the area for the kills to count. So technically you could even fire a grenade launcher from stronghold to dorms, and if you do end up getting a kill inside 3-story, then it will count towards this task. And when you are working on this task, then you can use any guns or wear any gear that you do want to or that you are comfortable with. But when deciding what to bring to dorms, then one thing that you can take into consideration when choosing your loadout is to bring guns or gear that is required for other tasks at the same time, so that this way you can make as much progress as possible towards as many tasks as possible with each raid. For example, you could bring in a shotgun for setup or silent caliber, or another example would be to wear the gear required for Punisher Part 5, or if you did have a daily or weekly that required specific weapon kills, then you could bring those into a raid as well. Now with that being said, then one tip is that really long weapons are not going to be ideal to use inside of the dorms buildings due to the narrow door frames and also the potential of your gun getting barrel stuffed in CQC engagements, which will cause your PMC to turn the gun to the side, not allowing you to shoot the enemy. So with that in mind, when I go to dorms, I tend to stay away from something like an RSAS, a suppressed SVD, a long barrel MP153 HK or juice cannon, just because they are very large and long weapons that will decrease your maneuverability and ergo inside the dorms buildings. So instead, some of the better options in my opinion for inside the dorms would be something like an MP7, an MCX, a Vector, a 7.62 MDR, or a short barrel juice cannon. And even some of these shortened shotgun builds will work, and since all these weapons are more compact, then you will be less likely to run into handling or clipping issues. And each one of the options that I stated do have viable and available ammo choices in mid to late wipe, and they are relatively affordable if you did happen to level up your traders. And obviously in terms of the top tier ammo for all of these different guns, they will delete enemies if you can get your hands on them. And like we all know, the ammo that we are using is going to be more important than the gun that we run anyways, so one thing that you can do is to prioritize running any gun that you do have good ammo for, and then you can modify that weapon to fit your needs and preferences. Now, one of the most important things that I have learned from my fights at dorms is to make sure that you do always bring grenades, because it is going to give you a lot of versatility for all the different situations that you can find yourself in. And depending on your spawn, you'll either be the first people there or you will end up having to fight your way into dorms if you do get a Narnia spawn, which can be very challenging to try and push people when they have already got their tent set up and they are holding all the different angles in dorms. So by bringing in grenades, then that will be one tool that you can utilize to force people to move and break off the angles that they're holding, which can then allow you to take a bit more map control or even reposition and then turn the tables, and then end up holding them and then pop them when they attempt to repeat or regain an angle on you. You can also use grenades to cause audio disruptions and throw people off if you did want to try and make a play. Or for example, if you did want to jump over the bed on the second floor of the 3-story building or even go up one of the metal stairs. And they can also help you to get out of a room if you did end up getting yourself trapped in, especially an M67, since when you do throw it, then the enemy will pull back. But since you know that it does have a 5-second timer, then you're going to end up having a little bit of a buffer to push or pull back. Just remember not to get yourself caught pulling a grenade pin when you are too close to an enemy and not having a way to reposition if they do try and push you when they hear the grenade pin get pulled. Now to circle back to talk about pushing into dorms, I always make sure that I am pre-medded before actually getting into or before leaving either of the dorms buildings, which means that I will make sure that I use a Vaseline, Golden Star, ibuprofen, or morphine to prepare, or even better yet, a Propofol, since it not only has painkiller properties but also provides some slow healing over the course of its duration. And the reason for this is that the bushes outside of dorms have been infested with rats this wipe, so if you are rolling up late or if you're trying to leave after taking care of business inside, then you do want to make sure that you don't step on anyone in the bushes behind ice cream and the 3-story dorm building, or even somebody that's sitting on top of Rat Hill looking down towards you. So the best thing to do is to have your head on a swivel and that you do have a painkiller on board when you are leaving dorms to head for your next POI. Now, another reason to pre-med before stepping foot into dorms is that the momentum of these fights inside of dorms can swing very quickly, and people can also be hidden in rooms or shoot you from the windows as you do approach with no cover. So you really don't want to get a black leg and be a sitting duck outside with no cover. So by having a pain med on board, then it's going to allow you to remain mobile and to have a chance to actually fight back. Now, when you are actually fighting in dorms, one of the main things that you can do is to learn and utilize sound cues to your advantage.
We got bushes, car side, crouch walking.
Because whenever the audio actually works, it is very solid, but just know that Tarkov does really struggle with audio occlusion, which does cause major issues when you are dealing with buildings that have multiple levels. For example, both the dorms buildings. But after some practice, then you will gradually learn where people do tend to stand in most of the areas of dorms without having to actually see them. You'll end up being able to go off of very minute sound cues, game knowledge, and also experience. You'll end up just learning certain sound cues, like an easy one will be hearing tile, then you obviously know that somebody is in a bathroom. But if you do end up hearing metal on the second floor elbow, then you do know that somebody jumped up onto a bed frame in the corner and that they are going to be hard holding that angle, waiting for you to swing the corner. Or another thing that you will eventually learn is if you do hear somebody running outside and then jumping by a certain area of the building, then you will gradually learn all the different entrances other than doors that players can use to get into the dorms buildings. But again, just keep in mind that this is going to be when audio does actually work, so roughly 50% of the time, and that's being generous. Now lately I have found majority of the time that the dorms engagements are quite slow and people are just content to be extremely passive and play off of you. And they do this in an attempt to limit how much audio or info that they end up giving you. They're going to be completely happy to just hold an angle or hide in a room hoping to catch you off guard with your pants down for an easy kill. Now honestly, these guys have way more patience than I do because I do get too antsy most of the time, which definitely ends up getting me killed to people I should absolutely steamroll. But unfortunately, the statue meta is going to be difficult to combat and it's only going to get worse for a period of time until they do something about it. Or at least provide us with some way to counter it. So because of this, I do unfortunately have to recommend that you do slow it down sometimes and also utilize angles yourself in order to get an advantage. And while you are fighting someone, it is always a good idea to try to get as much information from them as possible in terms of what gun that they're using, if they are pre-firing, roughly how many bullets are they using, and if they do have to reload soon, how many of them are there, and if they are aggressive or passive. It's also important to note how they do react to grenades or fake grenade pulls and also healing or reload animations. This is a lot of information to take in initially, but it will end up becoming second nature over time. These are all just things that you end up getting faster at as you do end up getting more time under your belt and more playtime and practice time. And even though I did just mention the statue meta and how it is becoming more prevalent, just remember that Tarkov does tend to benefit the aggressor most times due to server desync and chronic connection issues. But that doesn't mean to be carelessly aggressive. You still want to put yourself in the best possible position to have an advantage, and you always want to win your one-on-ones. Which means that you need to know when you should be aggressive and when to be passive, and you also want to let them challenge you sometimes, and then that will allow them to potentially make a mistake. Like if an enemy is close to you, then don't be afraid to push if they do try and pull a pin on a grenade, or if you do hear a healing animation, since they may not have enough time to get their gun up and ready to fire again, then you will end up getting a free kill. And to build off of this, you will also learn in time when to use your grenades effectively to maybe get a cheeky kill or just to cause audio disruptions, which will then allow you to reposition and or push up. And another tactic if you are fighting a mover is that it is also not a bad idea to pre-fire based on audio if you do have a Chad running back and forth that's trying to use their free look to get information. Or you can even use this pre-fire tactic in certain areas or corners of dorms, especially in the second floor elbow if you do know that somebody is generally there. Chances are they're likely going to be holding an angle there, so if you do come around the corner pre-firing, then you could end up getting a kill where you would have otherwise died. Now another tactic that you can use is to equip a flashlight to your gun to help throw off their aim a little bit. And not that I recommend flashlight abuse, but it is in the game and people will be using it against you. But usually what I end up doing is I run attack laser solely using the laser option for my point fire spread. But if somebody does flashlight abuse me, then I do switch that bitch on because two can play that game. And then basically it's just going to become a toss-up on who gets luckier firing into the sun, but basically until BSG does something about nerfing it, then it is going to be a corny yet viable tactic. Also, another thing to remember is that the more practice that you do get over time and throughout multiple wipes, you will learn routes and flanks or ways that you can move around the dorms buildings to get yourself out of trouble. And not even just get yourself out of trouble, but also different ways that you can outplay other PMCs. And a way that you can also expedite learning some of this is by watching some of the ridiculously talented PvP streamers and see how they move and some of their tactics and tricks. And some of these guys have been playing since the alpha stages of this game, so don't think that you're necessarily going to be able to emulate them mechanically, but you can definitely learn different jump spots or peaks that you didn't know existed that can give you an advantage when fighting other people. I have 4 wipes under my belt, and I still regularly learn things from watching certain streamers who are definitely much better at PvP than myself. So if you do end up watching different streams, then it could definitely help you get better at the game, since knowledge is also power in Tarkov. Now, fighting in dorms can be very difficult as a solo, especially if you do continually run into teams. However, if you do have a teammate of your own, then you can coordinate to cover each other a little bit while repositioning. And they can also watch your back from third parties, since dorms is always infested with player scavs and also people sprinting towards the gunshots trying to get involved. So having that other person to relay information can greatly help you out. And lastly, but probably one of the most important tips, is to not get discouraged if and when you end up dying, even if it is going to be quite a few times while you are trying to complete this task, because every death in this game is going to be a way for you to learn for future engagements. And then you can take the knowledge that you do learn from each death, and then you can try and improve. I always do recommend, if possible, to record your gameplay and then review your deaths, and then see if there is anything that you can or could have done better. And then gradually over time, then you will become faster at making decisions or picking up on important cues from enemies. And then you will also learn when you should push or play passively the more experience that you do get PvP and in dorms. And just one final tip that I will mention is that once a fight does break out in dorms and then the grenades start flying, then the fluorescent light bulbs will start hanging from the roof and then flickering and honestly just making a huge racket, and it drives me absolutely mental. You can actually shoot the bulbs to make them stop making all that noise, and I figured that I would mention that since not many people seem to realize, and then they just end up putting up with the constant noise for the rest of the raid. So hopefully you guys found this guide useful and it does help you to complete this task. Thank you guys so much for checking out my video on this, and I hope that you have a fantastic rest of your day.